going to go ahead and get started, but this is really helpful. It looks like the majority of you in the room, this is kind of your first look at the new guidance. For some of you, you probably, maybe looked through it a little bit, but maybe, there's a lot still to devour. And it looks like some of you are like, yes, I've looked at it, I'm on it. Maybe you were one of the foster care points of contact that attended my virtual presentation last week. This is going to be very similar to that. If you are one of those people, I would actually encourage you, you might pick up something different a different time. Every time I kind of go through this, something kind of comes through a little bit more. But welcome. This is the federal update for the new joint guidance for foster care. Now, this is non-regulatory guidance. So the law itself has not changed. The thing that has changed is more kind of specific answers that the federal government has given when they've had certain questions and or some issues that they saw that they actually didn't address when they wrote the first guidance. So some of this is going to be like, oh yeah, we already do that, and that's great. Other points, it's like, oh, we probably need to work on this point. So it's probably going to be a little bit between those two things. All right. For those of you that don't have my contact, obviously my name is Kim Humphrey. I'm the foster care point of contact. And also, as some of you, I get to interact also on the McKinney-Vento program. I kind of split my time between those two programs. But for foster care, I am your go-to person. And please, reach out, calls, emails. I'm definitely wanting to help wherever I can. So for the agenda today, we really are just going to go over the guidance kind of step by step, and then very shortly talk about next steps for districts. Every time that I talk about foster care, I really hone in on this educational stability piece for our students in foster care. As you know, sitting in the seats that you are, serving the students that you serve, a lot of our students in foster care do not have that stability. In fact, data says that every time a student changes schools, it can take 4 to 6 months to recover academically. So we know sometimes that's, true for some students. Sometimes they maybe can adjust a little quicker. But when we're thinking about students in foster care and they have 3 placement changes in a school year, that means they almost may lose that whole school year just because of the moves. So because of that, we have 2 strategic goals for foster care. One is to improve graduation rates. And the reason why I point that out is that foster care students actually have, as a subgroup population, have the lowest graduation rate. So when you compare it to like multilingual learners or McKinney-Vento, migrant youth, we're at the low end, our students in foster care. So that's a point that we're really looking at. And the way that we can possibly do that, and I say possibly because I know that that's a loaded word, is to really prioritize the school of origin. And the reason why I say that is whenever we can, we had 1,773 moves of students in foster care during the 22-23 school year. Obviously, that's just a lot of moves for our students. Now, that may mean one student didn't move at all, and another student moved 4. So I'm not saying every student is moving, but we do have a lot of movement across the state. And I know that doesn't have just to do with schools. That has a lot to do with the placements that our students are being put in. So we're actually kind of in a system that we don't have a whole lot of control over sometimes. So that leads us to this new guidance. They even changed the name. It's Ensuring Educational Stability and Success for Students in Foster Care. If you don't have a copy, that QR code hopefully will take you right there. We also, or what I have really found helpful is the American Bar Association, and hopefully you have access to this PowerPoint, I think on Hoover, but there is an overall summary and then a 2-page summary that they made, and it is just very helpful if you're really kind of trying to look at the bullet points. Those are 2 very helpful documents that I have used as well. So this guidance is basically updating everything that was written in 2016. It's nice. It's been about a decade. They have a decade of information with students in foster care, and so they're trying to look into where are the stress points, where are the things we didn't clarify as much. So the unfortunate thing is that the last document was 28 pages. This document is 72 pages. So if you're printing it out, you are killing a tree, but that's okay. You can mark it up. But just to let you know, that's why you probably feel like this is just a lot of information, because it is. It's almost triple the information. So, and there are some new sections specifically on school stability, academic success, special populations, funding, and data collection, which were just not really mentioned in the prior data or prior guidance. It's still written in the question and answer format, so if you're one of those people that love like the question and then the answer, you'll still love this guidance. If you were hoping for a little bit more kind of concrete layout, you won't get that. But what they do to help is they do a letter and a number. So as you go through, you can kind of say this is section A, and then they have 1, 2, 3 to kind of give it some organization. And then the last thing that I always do is you do that like Control F if you're looking for like immediate enrollment. Type that, and it will take you to right where it says the information. So this is the best I can tell you right now is that unfortunately the interaction of this presentation isn't going to be as interactive as maybe others we've done, and so we're just going to buckle up and get through the guidance. So the first part, the provisions, it kind of just lays out again who are the students that we're talking about. So we're talking about all students in foster care enrolled in an SDA. And what that looks like at the local level is this applies to students that are attending schools that receive Title I subgrants, which I think is everyone in the room, so I think we're all covered. The definition of foster care has not changed. So that has remained constant. It's still that 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians and for whom Child Welfare Agency has care and placement and care responsibility. DSS, if you ever have a question, is a student in foster care? Are they not in foster care? I really would implore calling DSS and asking them, because sometimes even like a foster parent registering a student sometimes may not know the actual definition. So that's the biggest thing here, is just for you yourself being able to ask and clarify, is the student in foster care? Yeah. Yeah. And if you hear someone say formal kinship care, that could or could not be foster care. It could mean that someone is doing kinship care and they are a licensed foster placement. And so that would be more of our like, they have someone in foster care and they are now a friend or a family member and they now are a licensed foster care placement. But we do have some informal kinship placements. So it could be that it is not even foster care, but it's a family member taking care of them. So it's, like I said, I wish it was easier to totally tell you exactly about if a student is in foster care or not, but really checking in with DSS to kind of help with that. And I think that I have their information at the end of the slide, or end of the presentation. This also has not changed. Basically, these educational stability provisions happen one of two reasons. One, they enter into foster care, or two, they change placement. And again, that part hasn't changed. This has remained the same. From a state point contact level, these really also have not changed. They still, one of my main goals is to collaborate with DSS and to issue state guidance. One way that we've done that, we do have a new best interest determination document that we've been using this year. I've heard from some districts sometimes DSS still uses the old form. That's okay. I knew that was probably going to happen. We are, though, whenever you can help educate your caseworkers and say there is a new bid form, so next time let's use this, or we're in the middle of the meeting, let's just quickly, use the new document. I'm supposed to be monitoring LEAs to ensure compliance with Title I. If you are a foster care point of contact, you probably saw last year that there was an end of the year survey. We are going to continue doing that every year as kind of our compliance piece. And so that survey has a lot to do with, how many students in foster care, what have you noticed? Are bids happening? Is there anything that, we could help you with? And that's going to kind of take the place of that like desk monitoring. And then ongoing strategies to collaborate with DSS on the state level, just to give you a little behind the curtain. We have a quarterly meeting at a state level. We're a state level DSS in our office. We talk and we collaborate. And then we also work on training. So sometimes Shana Charles, she's the state point of contact. You've probably seen her on some of our calls. And then I'm on their trainings and their calls. So we're trying to collaborate the best that we can. And then this last piece is that what they really elevated in this new guidance is data sharing and trying to find ways to collaborate. And so we are really, we're having conversations at the state level about what that can look like. Some of you have probably seen the foster roster. It is what it is. It's helpful and not helpful at the same time. And so we're trying to look ways that we can collaborate better in the future. This is kind of the main part for those points of contact at the local district. Again, none of this has really changed too much, but a lot of it is involving policies, procedures, and then providing training for the staff. And so the first one is talking about developing policies, procedures for the best interest determination process. The thing that we want to note here is they mention role-specific action. So who's doing this information or doing these steps, and then what is the timeline? So when you're working through your policies and procedures, when you're thinking about that for your local context, it could mean that you as a point of contact are doing every bit. It also probably doesn't look that way. So making sure that's written out. One thing, and you'll see me say this, and I'm going to probably mention it every time it comes up here on this slide, they have put time requirements into the guidance. Last time they just said as quickly as possible. Now they've written in 3 business days. So pretty much anytime you see some kind of transfer, they've now written in 3 business days. I think it's going to be hard to track that, just realistically, but I think it would be good for us to try to think about how we could. So again, this facilitation of records, they put 3 business days. The next one is training school staff on the needs for students in foster care. This would include knowing about immediate enrollment. And then the last one is also you at the local level collaborating with DSS and what that looks like. What this a lot of the time looks like is those transportation policies of collaborating between the 2 of you. And there'll be more information on that later. So these are the regional contacts that I've talked about before. If you're thinking of just like a quick kind of flow chart that I would think of, if you were having a difficulty not knowing if a student was in foster care, I would go straight to your regional contact. Mostly the reason why I say that is because the caseworker may or may not be able to get back to you in a timely fashion. I've worked a lot with the regional coordinators to hopefully be as quick as possible. If a district is asking about a student, they really need to know what is the definition of that student. So please know that Tamika, Laverne, Brittany, and Megan, they are expecting emails of you asking, is the student in foster care? Because that will really kind of hopefully move the process quicker, because if they're not in foster care, then that kind of relieves you of those educational stability provisions. It may mean they fall into another category, but for, at least for foster care, they can help give that answer. So this is a kind of an elephant in the room situation, but they kind of start the guidance with the points of contact, where they should say that the points of contact should have sufficient capacity and necessary resources to meaningfully oversee implementation of Title I educational stability provisions. It's a very weird way of saying you need time to do your job. A lot of you, I know, wear lots of hats. I don't know if this provision is going to help you at a local level. Say, hey, I actually need more time for foster care because it's, the new regulatory guidance said so. I don't know, but they do, I think, at least acknowledge that this is a lot of work. So that's at least helpful that USED realizes foster care is a lot of work. Now, I don't know exactly what that means for you at the local level, but hopefully this means if you need help, maybe you can utilize this to kind of engage in that conversation. So things like today or different times throughout the year, I try to do some virtual training as well. It is really important for us, and you'll hear this, to collaborate. And I take it, at least on the state level, is that if we're not collaborating on the state level, it's going to be very hard for you to collaborate at the local level. So we're working very hard to make sure that we ourselves are working together on a top level, and then later bringing it down and training staff. And so it's really important, I think, that this collaboration piece, I think, sometimes works better in some instances just because you have that natural crossover. You may have some personal contacts. If you don't have those personal contacts with DSS, I would say that would be a good place to start. You're kind of like taking away, what should I do with this new guidance? If you don't have those, I would just jot that down as like that's the main step to go forward, is to make those connections and find ways to collaborate. All right, so we're already to section D, so we're doing good. We literally have to go to section Z though, so I'm going to keep going. But section D is on the school of origin. This is a public school a student is enrolled in when they enter into foster care or when they change placements. So this can be confusing. A student will always have a school of origin, meaning that's where they came into foster care. And that is like proviso. They're going to be responsible for that student. For this definition, school of origin does change, though, as the student goes through foster care if their placement changes. So, for instance, if they're in like school A and they move to school B and they go to school B for 5 months, now when they have that next bid meeting, school B is their school of origin. It is very, I think, confusing. The one thing that they did note, and I don't know if I put a bullet in here, usually when you're doing a bid meeting, you do it between the school of origin and then the new residential school, wherever that student is living. They did say that we could possibly think of other educational options that would be helpful for the student. I don't know exactly what that means. It could mean that maybe a previous school that the student went to that they really want to go back to. I think most of the time, though, our conversations are going to be between the school of origin and that residential school, but it does kind of open the door to there could be other schools that we're looking at. School of origin does include feeder schools, so if you have a student that is in middle school and they're moving to high school, the school of origin would be that feeder school that would move up to high school. And then if they've never been enrolled in a public school, so they have no school of origin, they should be immediately enrolled in a new school, even with no records formally required for enrollment. So basically, I know that sometimes we have said, wherever the student came into care, that school automatically is their school of origin. They actually say in this case, if they haven't attended school, they actually don't have a school of origin, and that's for this purposes, not necessarily for provisos. It's still that address address where they were at when they came into care. But so anyway, that's kind of it's probably as clear as mud currently. And then obviously LEAs are encouraged to allow students to stay in their school of origin even if they would exit foster care, just providing that until the end of the school year. And that's, again, it's not necessarily in the law, but it is some guidance. All right, with Section E, this is all about the best interest determination, which honestly I think is kind of the main way that we're able to provide educational stability is good bids. Even if they end up having to change schools, if the bid meeting is helpful and information is passed to the next school and they have a quick way to get connected, I think we're on the right page. So this is where I'm putting a lot of effort, at least especially when I engage with DSS, is like this is the main push that we're doing. And so if you're unfamiliar, a bid is basically a meeting, a process the school district and DSS partner to basically decide what is in the best interest for the student moving forward. So it's triggered when a student comes into foster care or when they change placement. And again, it says here, they mentioned those 3 business days. You'll see it pop up. They did have a little note here about group homes having, before a student is enrolled in a group home, they should have a meeting talking about whether or not that's in the best interest of the student. And I kind of a little bit laughed at that one because that's just not going to happen probably in South Carolina, but it was something that was noted in the guidance. So I think we can always kind of pull in the guidance and talk about it. But we really want to be thinking about a student, especially, I know DSS isn't always thinking about education, but we are. So we may feel like that drippy, like drop that's always there, but I think it's kind of our role. We're the one that are always bringing in education and trying to highlight it. So sometimes when I do that, I think I'm doing something wrong if I'm the drippy faucet. In this case, I want you to think that you're actually doing something right if you're the drippy faucet, in the sense that you are the person that's highlighting that educational stability continuously. I think we're going to hopefully grow the caseworkers' knowledge in DSS in this aspect, but ultimately we're the main advocacy on our side. They listed off who's some good participants in the bid. I've heard from many people, these bids, 1, aren't happening, 2, it's just a formality, 2 or 3 at best, there's just 2 of us talking about it. So I've heard everything, and I understand that obviously what I'm talking about is what we hope or what we're moving towards. But especially if a student has an IEP or a 504, really getting someone from that realm to be a part of the meeting is so important, just because of what may be in the IEP. But here's obviously a list. The student is obviously one of those people that we really want to take at least what they say into account. I'm trying to think of what that code was for. I think it might be the information sheet. I put in those little QR codes all the time, and I'm like, that one will take you somewhere. No, I think it's the information sheet for the bid because I think I have a bid slide later. But all right, so highlight again, 3 business days. And again, I don't know exactly the best way to track it or to kind of see where you are currently, but working to make sure systems can at least have a flow that we could possibly find out if students are being enrolled and having their meetings in the amount of time necessary. Yeah, there's the one for the bid form. So this will pull up the new bid form if you haven't seen it yet. That will take you to that. All right, School of Origin Transportation, we're to F. Doing pretty good. So if a student is going to stay in their school of origin and they need transportation, this is where section F comes in. The main point here is that we are required to collaborate with DSS to develop or implement written procedures. This would hopefully cover a lot of things, but basically one thing is who's paying, which is a big part. And then obviously that last bit here where transportation is able to be continued throughout, till the end of the school year, even if they exit foster care. I know some of you, raise your hand, I guess, you've had trouble doing a transportation policy with DSS. Yeah, I figured there'd be a decent amount. And it's interesting that we talk about this because I think when I first came into the position, I was kind of like, hey, can we have signatures? I know a lot of districts are wanting signatures. And when I worked with the state DSS team, they're like, we're just not going to sign it. And I was like, okay. So that honestly kind of is why it was included. We included a transportation page in the bid. That way you will talk about it in the bid, and then they're going to sign that document. So there is some, hopefully you talk about who's paying, and then there is some signature at the end. So that's where I am really holding on to that signature part, is through that bid document. Now, you should still have policies and procedures around transportation. It would still be a good idea to collaborate with DSS on those, but we're not expecting anyone to have those signed anymore. So if that was something that was keeping you up at night, you can just blissfully fall asleep now because that signature on that document isn't necessary. Those bid documents is where we're really signing, like, for that student, we are paying for this, or we're splitting costs on this, or this is the specific procedures for that student. So that was where we were able to kind of come to a compromise. Let's put it that way. Yes.
Is there any possibility that the state can start providing districts money for this particular situation?
Yeah.
ESSA has a large budget, maybe earmark some of that for us. That would help us tremendously because it's so unpredictable.
Yes.
And some of the requests are so unrealistic. And to be honest with you, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I hear you.
You can't provide someone who translates from Charleston to Kershaw County for half a school year.
No, I understand that for sure. There has been some talk about these, and I think maybe we'll get to it, or maybe before it was a slide before. There's these Title IV funds that are Social Security funds that not every student in foster care is even eligible for those. So even though DSS themselves has transportation money, they also, I think, are feeling the push as well, just because that Title IV money doesn't cover all their students. I think that there is room and space to grow in collaborating for that, for sure. From our level, at least at the Department of Ed and specific transportation funds, what we're recommending is having a Title I set aside just for foster care transportation, and hopefully putting aside some money for that. You may use it, you may not use it. That's one thing I actually noticed in the end of the year survey, and this is a little side point, but I appreciate that question, so I'm going to go into it for a second. I think in that, at the end of the year survey, districts were saying like less than 10 students are even needing that transportation. Mm-hmm. So that's the hard thing for me, is if I get a survey and I look at that, it's hard to say for a statewide that's something that we need. So if that's something, a need that you have for your individual district, I think I would like to work with you individually and see what we can do. Right now, if I look at it from the whole state level, that survey kind of showed that wasn't actually currently a huge need. I'm not saying that it's not, but that's the kind of data I would need in order to get us to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in our district, all we have is would be caps, and that's against DSS's policy to allow children caps. So it's right. So why the numbers might go low is because within their own policy, you can't allow children in foster care caps.
Yeah, and that's one thing I am working with Shayna on, is one, having those caps, and that they would have more options for transportation. that they would allow, so then we would have more options to transport. I'm working with DSS to work with their procurement to hopefully have more options. So we noticed that that's a concern. That is something that we are.
That is a hurdle to keep the children in your origin.
Absolutely.
Your policy about that, so then we have to transfer those children to a different district.
Right. And I would say if you are wanting to, if you are wanting school of origin for a student, those regional points of contact, so like for your instance, is really talking to them and saying like, hey, we need to find an option for this student, because they actually have a little bit more control over that than the caseworker does. So if you ever have transportation concerns, I would contact that regional contact, and if they aren't helpful, you can always connect with me. I'm always willing to kind of jump in and help that.
What I'm hearing you say is they might be more flexible with the different transportation. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I hate that we have to reach a fight point. But right, well, no, I mean, exactly. I mean, more just like full discussion. Because if we aren't having those, then it's going to be hard for me to push the envelope. Does that make sense? Like, I need us to reach a level, so it's like we're pushing them.
But I think just looking at data point, it's not a true data point.
Yeah, well, no, and I agree with that. I'm just saying, and that's honestly, I hope that survey over time will really show it, because that will actually, that will speak larger than just an individual situation. I think that a lot of individual situations would be helpful. It's going to be more work for all of us, honestly. So it's not going to be an easy thing, but I think we kind of need to reach that point where we are kind of flooding the issue, so then an actual problem needs to be addressed, I guess.
I was just going to say, as a former ESS employee, in all fairness to the county offices, they don't have a lot of flexibility. And that's part of the reason why they were always reluctant to sign those agreements, particularly when it came to transportation. So that absolutely has to be something that's driven from the state down to the county offices. Now, having said that, they do have access to funds other than the 4U funds. They get from the block grant money. They get some other funds that they could look at. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know. I think it's one of those things where
and the point I was going to make is, folks, don't kind of keep your patience a little bit with your local county office, because trust me, they're doing the best they can. But it's, and they want what's best for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I consider us to be a point, like a part of the circle to help a student be successful. And the hard thing is we are not all in the same system. And that in of itself is two big systems trying to work together. You guys know that is like moving mountains. So when I talk about working with DSS, I always hold Shayna, her 4 regional contacts in the highest regard. They are actually, most of them very good friends of mine that we work with. So I never want you to hear that I don't appreciate them or that they aren't doing the best that they can. I just think as we work together in 2 systems, it is really helpful to find ways that we can actually change. And the way we unfortunately will have to change is probably seeing a problem and then addressing it. And that's honestly, me hearing about it is the way that at least gets moved on that kind of state level. So you may think that you're annoying me by emailing me a lot. You're not. I'm actually taking that data and putting it together. But yeah, that basically in the end, page 4 is supposed to be that really helpful for that student with what the next step is. This is a new thing, is a highlight for cost of transportation. I think that you're pretty familiar with the fact they're like, it doesn't matter how much cost, that can't be the thing that would stop you from transporting a student. What they did add in is administrative burden. So administrative burden and the cost cannot be a reason that a student doesn't stay in their school of origin and receive transportation. So I think this is noticing that there was a lot of administrative burden, and that's just the reality. So again, I think sitting in your seats when things aren't as easy or as it isn't working, it can think like I'm doing something wrong. And in this case, I think that we are in a system that already just has administrative burden. And that's not really a cheerleading line because it's a little bit of a bummer, but that is just part of the process, is working through that administrative burden. For some of you are kind of wondering what should be in a transportation policy because you may have not have looked at your transportation policy in a while. I do have some little check marks of things that you can look into. Obviously, talking about disputes, out of school activities, how prompt, obviously those 3 business days, additional costs, who oversees. This is more of those procedural items. The cost again, additional costs, a list of low cost options, age and developmentally appropriate, and then obviously sometimes working with other districts, working with DSS, and then those should be looked at yearly. Let's see here. So yeah, this is kind of listing off those different funding buckets that some students, if they also are have special education and their transportation can be paid through you know, that's also a really great option as well. Oh, the one point that I did want to do is that second one. It says requirements also apply to charter schools considered to be an LEA. So we've had some questions if like this school we don't provide transportation, so we don't have to provide transportation. Well, if you're the school of origin and it's a student in foster care, even if you don't provide transportation for everyone, this would be a student where you would provide that transportation. And that's just a screenshot of that page 4. Hopefully, if there are things that we need to add to this, maybe send me an email. We tried to make it, you know, comprehensive. So you're talking about, you know, where the student's going, even who's enrolling them, to kind of give some next steps. All right. So immediate enrollment. If a student is not staying in their school of origin, obviously they're going to have to move to that next school. They don't consider it enrolled unless the student is basically fully participating in school activities. So I know a lot of times that enrollment happens on paper, but that doesn't actually mean that they're attending school. Here they say immediate enrollment means the student is actually enrolled in the school, but in seat is how they say when the American Bar Association was describing it. And so, and again, these time restraints, 3 days. If you need, ever run into issues where, you know, DSS, the previous school, you're running into some issues with this, please don't hesitate to reach out. The goal here is just to basically move as quickly as we can to get a student enrolled. And this is even if they don't have all the documents that you would like to have. I know that a lot of times it feels like you're doing a student a disservice, especially if you don't even have to bid from the previous school. So when I say without other records, I think that there is some, at least having a bid would be like what I would say would be best case scenario, where you would know this student, a conversation has had about the student, and now they're moving here. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes they just get changed without a bid. Obviously, that happens. But we really, as much as you can, push on that bid needs to happen before enrollment. I think we're going to try to keep moving that. And then, like I said, this is immediate enrollment is included in that foster care enrollment survey at the end of the year. So again, you can kind of give some feedback on that loop and how it's going as well. 3 days. I don't know if I should just get a t-shirt that says 3 days. I think everything should happen in 3 days. So yeah, we want to make sure that we're doing that as soon as practical as in 3 days. All right. So basically from here on out till we end, this is kind of all new information. And I put those in quotations because we're still talking about academic success. We're still talking about things that we've probably talked about since this has been around. It's just they actually gave themselves an actual part of the guidance. And so here, obviously, attendance is a huge barrier for students. If they're not attending school, then they're not going to be successful. So for your students in foster care, if at all possible, sharing their attendance data with the DSS caseworker. And the reason why I say this is that there's a district that we're working with DSS where a student has a lot of absences due to they were doing visits with their parents. It's 10 absences for visits with their parents. Now, are visits with parents important? Absolutely. Would we want them to miss 10 days of school? No. So I think that the proactiveness, the districts, as much as they can, connecting with the individual student's caseworker and keeping them updated on their attendance would be very helpful. I would also ask the same thing from DSS, that they would be communicating with the school, especially if they were starting to take them out 10 times, like, hey, like we can do these meetings during a different time because the student needs to be in class. And I think this is kind of reached the point where we're like, oh yeah, that will happen. But we just want to make sure whenever we can. So I don't know what that means on your district level or what processes would be easiest for you, but looking into ways to do that. And then honestly, tracking that chronic absenteeism for students in foster care so we just don't reach that point. And so those are kind of two, 1A or I1, 2, and 3, excuse me. Those kind of highlight those attendance pieces. Part J talks about the discipline. And I think that we all know in this room, students in foster care have a myriad of experiences that could sometimes relate to their behavior. Thank you. And we are not even close to being done, but we're going to hurry it up. So making sure that we're making sure our students in foster care aren't getting more discipline. And then obviously this last one, K, these transitions, making sure that they are going from middle school to high school to post-secondary options and doing those transitions. The next part is talking about those special populations where we know our students in foster care sometimes are not just students in foster care, they fall into other buckets. And so really looking into these special populations and what it might mean for a student. They did clarify a little bit of when McKinney-Vento and foster care will be where they would overlap, which isn't very often. And then obviously DJJ, and then preschool. And so the biggest thing on this one is knowing that those that are in preschool, especially at a public school preschool, that the educational stability covers those. So they should be having bids and transportation if necessary. The funding piece, as you guys know, the Title I Part A is where our funding lies. So that set aside is a great way to do transportation. There's also some other title programs that they've highlighted, like Title IV Part A, 21st Century, and then this obviously right here is DSS funds, so Social Security Title IV. The biggest thing here is that all students are not qualifying for all the funding sources, so you have to be kind of knowledgeable of that student. Then obviously the data collection, we're almost there. We're at W through X. We get to Z. We should be collecting data on our students in foster care. It's the reality. I know this is a lot of educational or burden on your side of things, but if we know where the data is, then we can obviously improve outcomes. DSS should also be tracking that data, and so again, that's why we're working on kind of those data sharing opportunities. The thing that I would work with your local DSS on is, are there ways you can share data locally? And obviously, while we're doing that, also keeping the student's privacy in high regard. We also have looked, the Uninterrupted Scholars Act may help with a little bit more flexibility in how we can transfer information, but again, wanting to really highlight FERPA as we're dealing with our students. So, next steps. I would say even if sitting through today, I would still recommend reading through it all, maybe not all in one sitting, maybe read it before bed. I think it could be a great way to calm yourself, maybe help you fall asleep, I don't know. But reading through it in your own time, kind of taking it chunk by chunk. Just start making a list. What are things that I need to address that this new guidance is addressing and I just haven't? Maybe I address it in my mind, but I don't have it written out. What procedures could be placed to reduce barriers? And then lastly, how can we help? And so with that, as I end here, please feel free to, I'll leave this up just in case you don't have your contacts information, but please feel free to email me and say, this is how you could help. Okay, I value that a lot, and so I appreciate you guys being willing to sit through this, but I'm just excited about how this guidance will help us have more conversations to hopefully improve outcomes for students in foster care.